good afternoon, and very good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Videography. I hope you guys doing well. Today's video is something about big, like really big. But how big? Like for average user, for prosumers, for hobbyists, it's really big. But for professionals, it's not big enough. You will understand when you will see what I'm going, going to show you. Well, yep, this is the Nikon 180 to 600 f 5.6 to 6.3. So yeah, so this is the lens which I'm talking about. This lens. Thank you, Nikon Middle East, first of all, for letting me have this lens. So they gave me this lens so I can went out, try to take sample shots and share my review about this lens. But I'm sure you're definitely going to ask, well, what about its comparison with 200 to 500, the f-mount lens? Here it is. So that's 200 to 500 at 5.6 constant aperture. Uh, so and standing next to it. So like if I'm putting this side by side, you will see. Let me take off the hood, so you will going to really understand what I'm talking about. Because definitely you will look for the sizes. Internet is full with the comparison of these two. So if I'm putting them, I have to with the FTC adapter on the 200 to 500. The 180 to 600 looks taller, okay, which it is. But when I extend the zoom of 200 to 500, this lens is 180 to 600 has become shorter automatically. Yep. So when this 200 to 500 at 500, this lens looks shorter. The thing is, this lens is purely designed on. This lens is purely designed without any external zoom. So the zoom in this lens is having a very short through. So it's like this is 180 and this is 600. 180, 600. 180, 600. This is how the short the focus the focal length variation is like the zoom is just like, yeah, there is no extension part of the zoom, whereas in the 200 to 500 the zoom through is too much. So like if this is 200 and if I have to zoom to 500, I have to rotate it like 2.25 to move. So you see I have to move my hand too much. It's like so this guy is very heavy. So when I compare the weight, this lens is a little bit lighter. I'm not going to talk about how many lens element and all this. This lens is lighter and compared to the 200 to 500. I'm definitely going to ask, how about the focus? How about the sharpness? I'll show you everything, don't worry. I already did the side-by-side comparison of this lens. I use this lens on the Nikon Z9, okay, and this lens is coming far more than I was expecting. Let's talk about the result that I received from that. And first of all, the zoom range. The zoom is 180. So definitely you will get a little wider frame. I'll show you on the screen right now. So in compared to 200 to 500, I was getting wider frame at 180. And when I extended to 600, it has more reach than 200 to 500, because 500, of course, obviously 200 to 500 maximum is 500, but with 5.6 aperture constant, where when you zoom it this lens to 600, it goes to 6.3, but that's only one third of our stop difference. So 5.6 to 6.3 is one third of our stop difference, which is nothing. It's just like you are shooting at ISO 100, then you are shooting at ISO 125, which nothing, you know. So that's the only thing that you will get. But the bouquet that you will get at 600 is far more than you will get at 500. Even this is at 6.3, whereas 200 to 500 at 500 is 5.6. But because this lens is having more focal length, that's why you will get more bokeh, more blur at the same. I'll show you on the screen. Even I noticed that, and it was really strange, which I noticed, and it was like, wow, this the extra focal length of 100 millimeter, which adds to the longer side to get you the more blur. Anyways, so how about the result of this lens over the Z9 that I used? But before I shared, I have to put down this lens because it's very heavy. Okay. Now, that being said, before I share the result on the screen, I have to share with you a couple of technical things which you have to notice. And based on that, then I will be sharing the final conclusion side by side comparison of this 180 to 600 with 200 to 500. Okay. The first thing that you have to mention, it applies to every brand, which is that these, I was having a trouble in locking the focus on the bird, okay, with this 180 to 600 on Z9. Okay, and last weekend, couple of weeks back, I was using 400 4.5 VRS over the Z8, and I had no issues at all. No issue at all in locking the bird focus with. Of course, the Z8 was with 2.8 firmware update 2.0, and it was doing so well. I wasn't expecting so, but I was having some autofocus frame with this 182 600 on Z8 under the same scenario where the bird is flying and something obstruction comes, then Z9 was focusing on this obstruction when the bird flies back. The moment the birds come out from this blocking, it required the focus again. But Z9 was basically locking, so basically losing the focus from the bird over the obstacle and then require the focus again on the bird. Z8, I was not expecting that at all. I know Z8 was smoothly locking the focus on the bird, regardless if any obstacle comes or not. Even though the autofocus setting was identical in both Z8 and Z9. Now, why it happened? I have this theory, and it's my assumption, and I believe it applies. First of all, I was shooting at 4.5 and with 400, so I was constantly at 4.5. This lens is starting at 5.6, and I was having missed frame when it comes to focus on the longer side when the aperture was at 6.3 and this one to 600. Now, the technical thing which I was trying to say is that it applies to any brand, it applies to our mirrorless, any brand. The autofocus system works on the aperture, and the minimum aperture that any mirrorless camera needs to hunt for autofocus, it's f5.6. f5.6. You can verify that by looking into the aperture iris on the lens. Let's say you are having 50 millimeter f1.4 lens or 85 millimeter f1.2 lens. Okay, you put those mirrorless lens on the mirrorless camera at the widest aperture as you can, and then you start closing the aperture. So you should see that you are at f1.4, then f2, the apertures start closing slowly from f2, then 2.8, then f4, then 5.6. And then it's keep getting close. So the aperture starts getting close. So the moment it's getting close after 5.6, when you switch to f8, it's not going to close. It remains fixed at 5.6. because the camera needs that much amount of light to hunt to go for autofocus. Okay, so first thing that any camera brand autofocus system need at least f5.6 aperture to to look for the autofocus the subject which is moving. Okay, so if you are shooting at 600 millimeter, it means that if you are shooting at 600 millimeter, which is at 6.3, automatically becomes 6.3. It means that there is a chances you will lose focus on this lens. You will. So that was the first technical part. Okay, so every mirrorless camera needs at least f5.6 aperture to work to acquire the focus on the subject. That's first part. The second technical thing which I'm trying to say is that you have to understand any autofocus system works on two things. Okay, two things. The first thing is the focus acquisition. How quickly the camera or the O camera plus lens, how quickly you able to acquire the focus on the subject. What are the contrasts and all that. So the focus acquisition is totally lens dependent, which how quickly the lens gets the focus, how it has the quickest autofocus motor to move the lens to acquire focus for you. Okay, so the autofocus motor inside the lenses plays a very critical role. So the faster the autofocus motor is, the expensive the lens becomes automatically. That's the first rule for manufacturing any lens. That's why the consumer grade lens having a slow autofocus motor. Even with this 200 to 500, why this lens is cheap? Even though that's one of the best lenses Nikon ever made, but the thing is, it has slow autofocus motor. That's why it's cheap. Okay, so that being said, the autofocus acquisition is the lens property. Now, once it requires the focus, how quickly it able to track the bird or the subject which is moving, that's the camera part. The camera autofocus system must be agile enough to acquire the focus. Keep blocking the focus on the subject. So the first, the focus acquisition, which is lens part, and then focus tracking, that's camera part. Now, combine these two technical things about this lens. So I mount this 180 to 600, okay, on Z9, and I start shooting birds. And I saw I was losing frame, I was losing focus, and I was questioning myself, how come? It's Z9. It's the best, it's the flagship camera. How come it's missing the focus? Whereas, when a couple of weeks back when I was shooting with Z8, I was having the best time when it comes to bird shooting. I was not able to miss any focus. The bird was, flying behind. I was shooting a sunbird. And you know how quickly the sunbird, move between the frames and between the flowers, between the bushes. So even sunbird, I was able to capture all of them, like 90% of the time when it was behind the flowers or behind the bushes. More than 95% of the time, I was able to acquire focus on the sunbird. Because I was shooting with firmware 2.0 on Z8 with 400 millimeter f4.5 lens. So, and I was constantly at f4.5 lens. Okay, so that's why that the technical thing which I said, that any mirrorless camera needs aperture of minimum f5.6 to acquire focus or keep tracking the focus. That criteria was already met with Z8 with f400 millimeter f4.5 at 4.5. That's why I was having the constant hit rate over there. But with this, I was not able to have. I missed few shots. Then I analyzed why I missed. Then I quickly it hit in my mind that when I was shooting at 600, I was missing the frame when the bird was, running behind the bushes and all that. That's where the camera locks the focus on this. on the bush, and then the bird move came back, it required the focus again. Now, definitely the question is, if the 6.3 aperture is the issue, then it should not lock the focus on the bushes. It should hunt for it. The thing is, the light on the bushes was mostly brighter and when I was shooting, when it compares to bird. So that's why I was able to, camera was hunting for the brightest part, because again, the focus system works on the light. So the more light where it was getting, the more the autofocus system quickly hunts for those area of the frame. Anyways, but still, the amount of sharpness. So that's where I was struggling. That's where I was struggling with Z9 and this lens. So that being said, regardless of the challenges that I had with this lens, when I was shooting this lens with birds, with the still objects, this lens is crazy. First of all, I want to show that the overall performance of this lens, the overall performance of this lens is far, far, far better than this 200 to 500. Yes, this 200 to 500 is the best consumer grade telephoto lens for shooting sports action wildlife for F mount. Best consumer grade. Now, that title has been taken by this lens. This lens is far sharper, far faster in autofocus. Very fast. It's like almost like 80% faster when it comes to acquiring focus. This lens over any Z camera. Literally. Literally. So, the overall conclusion is this 180 to, I have to put down this lens throughout this video because it is a little bit heavy. By the way, you can take out this tripod collar and this lens becomes lighter. Let me show you. It automatically becomes lighter. Tripod collar. It's become lighter, surprisingly. So there's adds value. Okay. Value means weight. So now let me go down over there on my computer and I'll show you what I mean by the autofocus. So now we are going to switch to my computer screen and I'll show you the autofocus comparison of this 180 to 600 and 200 to 500, and then I'll share the side-by-side images across the corner, how sharp both lenses are, okay, and the contrast. So let's go over the screen. Let's see the autofocus uh, speed test, and then I'll share with you the side-by-side images and how much the sharpness across the center part of the frame and also at the corners of the frame, stuff like that. And then we'll come back and we'll do the final conclusion. All right, so this is the comparison of this Nikon 180 to 600 f 5.6 to 6.3 VR, and I went side by side with Nikon 200 to 500 f 5.6 because these two lenses are like identical based on the specs they are made. So I had a chance to compare them side by side, and these are the test shots which I'm going to show you in a minute. We'll see the sharpness, we'll see the contrast, we'll see the comparison. I shot them both lens on Nikon Z9, which you will see in a video after this comparison. So let's get on. So first of all, let me compare this shot and this shot side by side. On the left hand side I have Nikon 200 to 500 f 5.6 at 340 millimeter, And on my right hand side I have Nikon 180 to 600 f 5.6 to 6.3 at 340 millimeter. Now the thing is, when you look them side by side, like of course that both are at 340 millimeter, but the 180 to 600 looks a bit more zoom, like it looks like this is more zoom, even though in the specs it shows the same focal length, which is surprising. But let's get side by side and bokeh. Of course, it looks the 180 to 600 looks zoom in, so that's why its bokeh is more prominent in compared to 200 to 500. So let's check the shot side by side, and from the center the 180 to 600 a little bit sharper, like here bit sharper, but 200 to 500 keeping up real well. But of course at the edge of the frame 200 to 500 is not as sharp as the 180 to 600, which you can see over here. This is more sharper on 180 to 600, but on 200 to 500 it is not. So that is the top part of the frame. Once you come down to the bottom of the frame, yeah, that looks sharper on 200 to 500, and equally goes for 180 to 600. Now then I used the far end, and I compare with this side by side with 200 to 500. So the left hand side I have 200 to 500, on my right hand side is 42 to 600. So I focus on this far tree and let's get along. So if I check this part of the trunk, obviously 180 to 600 is very sharp, very, and it's very contrasty. So 200 to 500 is not much giving me contrast. Actually, it's very flat. It's good considering the age, considering the technology. 200 to 500 is still pretty damn good, but it's not as good as 180 to 600. 180 to 600, you see these tiny branches on 180 to 600 is very prominent, whereas on 200 to 600 it is not. The contrast on over 180 to 600 is very much. 200 to 500 is very flat. So that's it. Moving to next image. Okay, on my left hand side is 200 to 500 at 500 millimeter. On my right hand side it's 180 to 600 at 600 millimeter. So obviously you can see the these vegetation a bit more zoom because it's at 600, whereas on the left hand side is at 500. So if I'm checking them side by side, especially these flower parts, because this is where I was trying to focus, and okay, now almost look like they are equal, like literally equal in this example. Over here 180 to 600 is a bit sharper. Obviously it's more bloody on 200 to 500 because the wind was blowing, so I'm giving the benefit of a doubt to 200 to 500, but it looks decent enough. And so overall this part of the frame, okay, so if I look for bokeh, the 200 to 500 is not giving me much bokeh because of the focal length. Now let's move to the next. Alright, this is the near end, like the 200 side and 180 side. So on my left hand side is 200 to 500 at 200, which is the shorter focal length, and my right hand side is 180 to 600 at 180 millimeters. So now obviously you can see the more frame on 180 to 600, because you see this part. Okay, you see this, because of 180 I can have more frame on the 180 to 600, which is not there at 200 to 500. Same goes over here. And if I look for sharpness, again the both side by side, the 180 to 600 is more contrasty, and 200 to 500 is more flat. So this is where the focus was, and it's clearly that 180 to 600 is sharper, more contrasty, and it's cooler. So 180 to 600 is more cooler, whereas 200 to 500 is a bit warmer. That's for sure. That is for sure. Alright, so let's move to the next image. Okay, now this is interesting because I purposely took this trunk in order to check edge to edge sharpness of the frame at the longer focal length. Because at the longer focal length, the two every glass is trying to give the maximum sharpness. So if I look at this part of the frame, alright, so surprisingly this is blurry on 200 to 500, whereas 180 to 600 is very sharp, very sharp. Okay, the middle part of 200 to 500, it's sharper, but at the edge it's not sharp, so it's obvious, it's sharp, very, but at the middle it's sharp, but still 180 to 600 is taking the lead. If I go this part of the frame, yeah, the lower part of the frame is not as sharp as 180 to 600. 180 to 600 is edge to edge very sharp, and it's, by the way, the 180 to 600 is not as a line lens, still is providing far more better result than 200 to 500. Now let's move to the last set of image. Okay, as you can already see, 200 to 500 on my left hand side and 180 to 600 on my right hand side. And obviously due to the shorter focal length, 180 I have more frame on 180 to 600 in compared to 200 to 500 because of 200 millimeter. So if I'm going down trying to see, okay, so this is 180 to 600 and this is 200 to 500. Now 200 to 500 over here at this part is keeping up really well, which is this over here. So yeah, it's good. It's good if I'm just talking about this part of the frame, which is this. It's sharper actually. So it's sharper. At 180, at 200 millimeter, the 200 to 500 is really giving a tough time to 180 to 600. But at 500 millimeter, the 180 to 600 is a clear winner. As you can see, it's not sharp enough. They're like 180 to 600. Okay, that's very promising, but the 180 to 600 again is more contrasty. As you can see over here, it's more contrasty, it's giving me more sharpness across the board, which you can see over here. 180 to 600 again, giving me more sharpness and more cooler color, cooler tone white balance, and compared to 200 to 500, which is still warmer. So if I look over here and look over there, yeah, 200 is 200 to 500. At 200 is really giving tough time to 180 to 600, but at 500 millimeter, the 180 to 600 is a clear winner. So that's the side by side comparison, guys. 180 to 600 is a clear winner uh, at the near focal length and the far focal length of the range under which these lenses are available. Also, the 180 to 600 is giving me more cooler image, whereas 200 to 500 giving me a more warmer image. Now we'll jump on the video section where we'll see the autofocus comparison of these two lenses. I use the same tree and this background tree for the autofocus point, so I was shifting the focus between this trunk to this tree back and forth like this. So I was doing the same with both lenses. So let's get back to the this video, and then I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright guys, so this is one more comparison side by side of this landscape image between 200 to 500 and 180 to 600. On my left hand side I have 200 to 500 at 6.3, and on my right hand side it's 180 to 600 at 6.3, and I use the tripod in order to take this shot over Z9. So let's go and compare them. Okay, let's start from there. Of course, the first thing is that there is a little bit of chromatic aberration on this, on the 200 to 500, which is not present in 180 to 600, and it is 180 to 600 having more contrast. We can see over here, as you can see, the floors very much distinguishable, which is not present in 200 to 500. And let's go to the moon. The moon detail are 180 to 600 is a hair bit sharper than 200 to 500, because 200 to 500 always perform better in the center, so the moon is in the center, so it's very much competitive between 180 to 600 and 200 to 500, but still it's not as sharp as like 180 to 600. And if we look at the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, and we start looking down, so it's not as sharp as 180 to 600. The contrast level is less, the image is noisy. No 200 to 500 despite of 6.3 aperture, which is the same on 180 to 600, but 180 to 600 is giving 720 ISO. I have no idea why the ISO was different. And this is one more area where the 180 to 600 outperform 200 to 500 when it comes to sharpness and the detail that you can get from these two lenses. It's very clear that 180 to 600 is far sharper and far more contrasty than 200 to 500 in this scenario. You can clearly see the details of the building. 180 to 600 is still another reason of being 180 to 600 cleaner is because of the low ISO, which is unfortunately which is high on 200 to 500, but that's fine. But when it comes to details, the resolution, 180 to 600 is outperforming 200 to 500. So that's it. So I thought to share with you this another comparison side by side, so you can see and by yourself. Thank you. Alright, so this is the autofocus comparison of 200 to 500 lens. Yes, I used my mobile and I tried to show you the real-time environment. Though I had a issue with the audio, so that's why I'm just narrating. This is 200 to 500. I used a Nikon Z9, and I'm just trying to shoot this tree and that tree far, and I'm going to switch the autofocus between these two uh, one by one using this. So here is the close focus, and this is far focus. And use your close focus, far focus. As you can see, the autofocus speed of this lens, which is nice, but it is consumer grade lens, and it's using the old DSLR technology, but it is using still quite decent autofocus speed. Uh, as you can, I'm keep switching between the tree the autofocus points, and I'm using my mobile to record this clip for you guys. So maybe there is a lack of construction as this is getting blurred. It's because my mobile are not able to record this. It has nothing to do with the camera or with the lens. So that's the basically the phone issue, not the camera or lens issue, as I'm using my iPhone. So again, let's get back. I start getting the focus in the EVF on my mobile, and it looks quite decent. So this is it. Alright, so this is the same thing I'm doing. I'm using now the 180 to 600 on Z9, and I'm going to shoot the same that tree far, focusing on this tree and the far tree, doing the same practice which I showed you. I'm recording this from my mobile, so here we go. So what you see is the EVF in the Z9, and this is the close focus, this is the fast focus. As you can see, this camera is doing very rapidly the far focus and close focus. Again, this is my iPhone issue, it has nothing to do with the camera. So let's see how fast the autofocus acquisition of this lens is. It's like almost half the speed of 180 to 600, like twice as fast, which is really incredible. So for sports action wildlife, this lens is crazy. As you see how fast it is acquiring the focus from near to far. Again, that's my phone issue. Again, it's nothing to do with the lens. The lens is doing very fine, and it's very quick in acquiring focus. So as you can see, it's very fast. It's very fast. Oh man, I really like the autofocus acquisition of this lens. So that's it. This lens is really damn good when it comes to focusing. Let's try one more time. Let's see one more time. This close focus, far focus, close focus, and this is far focus. So let's keep switching between the close focus and the far focus. So that's 180 to 600. Alright, so you saw the results. How was it? Of course, this lens exceeded all the expectations that we were having after experiencing the 200 to 500. Of course, it has to be superseded 200 to 500 legacy, which it did. It's very sharp. But, by the way, it's not S-line lens. It's not S-line lens, but still it's sharp. So imagine if this lens is S-line lens, it will create more sharp images with more autofocus acquisition motor in it. So, but it will increase the price. So, but from the consumer grade perspective, this lens is really damn good for all the consumers who are uh, you know, trying to get the wildlife shots at longer focal lengths. By the way, I just noticed 200 to 500 does not have any uh, like function button. It doesn't have. Whereas this lens too, it has one, two, three, four function button across, so you can use that. Very nice. Of course, the customized ring and the shortest focus through. Nice. I like it. So, shall I recommend this lens to the new Z camera owners? Of course, definitely. Shall I recommend this lens for any consumer for sports action wildlife? Absolutely. Shall I use this for any event photography? Absolutely. Shall I use this for landscape? Absolutely. Can I take portrait from this lens? Absolutely. Can. At 600 millimeter, you can create a very nice bokeh effect using this lens. What about the bird and wildlife? Of course you can. This is meant for these kind of short sports action wildlife. You can shoot birds. You can shoot animals. You can do event photography, portrait, landscape. This lens is for every purpose that you can go for, practically speaking. So the price is very moderate. I like it. But in order to use this lens more efficiently, by the way, if you are planning to use this lens for sports action wildlife, of course you need Z8 and Z9 or the upcoming crop sensor replacement of the T500, which as per Nikon rumors is Z90 with a stack sensor. But as per rumors, so I'm not going to say much about it. But you need Z8 and Z9 to fully utilize the benefit of this lens. Then you can get the best out from this lens, especially Z8. I am so impressed with Z8 new firmware update, to be very honest. I wasn't expecting. Damn, it changed my mind from Z9 to Z8. I thought the Z9 I should go for, but now after firmware update 2.0, the performance of Z8 is far more than I was expecting, but that's a matter of some other discussion. So I'm going to wrap up this video by saying that this lens, it's the replacement of the 200 to 500 which we all were waiting for, and you need the Z camera, Z8 and Z9 to get the best out from this lens. Of course you can use on Z6 and ZF or Z7 or any mirrorless. Even you can use this lens on Z30. You can use it and get the result. But Z30 autofocus was slow, so you won't get the best out from this lens. So you need a camera which can drive its autofocus system, autofocus motor to its full speed. That's where the Z8 and Z9 comes into the picture. So that's it. You saw the result on the screen. You saw the autofocus speed test between 200 to 500 and with this lens 100 to 600. Alright, so that's it. I hope you like this video, and I'll see you guys in future with some new content. Till then, take care.